as in Owen Farrell. Front page of the Telegraph Sports section, Farrell's Lions bombshell final reckoning for Spurs and United as well. So those two stories dominate. And this is in the Times. Pollock gets Lions call up after one cap. Yes, there are a few interesting inclusions and omissions. And of course, the naming of Mara Itoje as Lions captain, first England captain to take that role since Martin Johnson in 2001. Welcome along once again to Jonathan and to Charlie. Of course, we're going to start talking about what's been happening in the Europa League tonight. And we're going to start off with your paper, Jonathan, The Guardian. Now, tell you what, normally the person who sat in the seat dictates the flow of the conversation, but I'm going to let you pick what you think is the lead story. Is it Tottenham? Is it Manchester United? Which one would you, Jonathan, like to discuss first?
Well, I'm going to hedge my bets slightly. I'm going to talk about the final. And I think... I think people are talking about this as an all-English final and as going to be, sizzler. It's going to be a battle of Britain. It's going to be an incredibly heavyweight clash. And I think the reality is that it's also 15th versus 16th in the Premier League. So I don't think it's going to be a great game, to be honest. I think United and Spurs have both done incredibly well to get there, particularly Spurs tonight, given how precarious their situation was at the start of the evening. So maybe I'll start with them. I guess, I think Spurs have, in the last few weeks, have shown a little bit more, I guess you'd call it pragmatism, particularly on that 3G pitch, which makes it so hard to change direction, to play through a press, because, it's hard to turn and it's hard to sort of squirm out of a very good high press. So that they went long a lot, basically. They let Bodo have the ball, and I think that was really quite smart of them. And it's a style of play we haven't really seen a lot. For if you said at the start of the season that Tottenham would win a European semi-final like that against an opposition like that, playing like that under Ange Postecoglou, they wouldn't have believed you. But what is it that Ange said this week? Tottenham does strange things to people.
Yeah, it's a good quote, that, isn't it? And it suggests that they have got a plan B when it really matters, when it comes to the crunch. We saw that against Eintracht Frankfurt, of course, didn't we, in that away leg earlier in the competition. Charlie, is Ange Ball dead? Or is this him just really discovering a way to match managers better?
Look, ultimately, we've had a lot about the whole second season. Ange wins a trophy then, and I don't think anyone truly believed that it had any chance of happening. Certainly not until they got Bodo Glimt, to be honest. It's just extraordinary, isn't it? I actually think it will be a good game to watch, because they're both so bad. And it's not going to be high quality, but it's extraordinary. Tottenham have lost 19 games in the Premier League. Is it Man United 16 or something? And one of those is going to be in the Champions League next season, and banking a lot of money. So it's huge for the clubs financially as well. And I tell you what, it's a good earner for the hoteliers of Bilbao. A couple of my friends are trying to plan their travel, and it's looking at about £1,200 at the moment for a hotel room there, because of course there's a lot of English people who are going to be sort of going down and driving down. I think it's already virtually impossible to get a flight in and around that part of Spain or even southern France. So it's actually going to be, I think, a really good occasion. A bit of a strange one, as Jonathan said, 15th against 16th. It's not going to be a high-quality one. But it's a huge game for both clubs. It's a huge game for Ange Postecoglou, of course. Going back to what you were saying earlier, if Tottenham could win a trophy, a European trophy, and then, of course, we could be in the bizarre situation whereas the manager could still get the sack, because, there is a strong belief that he may not. He's very unlikely to last to next season, whatever happens. But, talk about, going out with a bang, beating Man United in the final of the Europa League in Bilbao would be a pretty good way to end your career. But, it's going to be an unpredictable one, that's for sure.
Let's just have a look at the Telegraph and what they're saying about Tottenham after that win against Bodo Glimt on that plastic pitch, on that artificial surface in the Arctic Circle. And you can see there the headline. Postecoglou directs successful Arctic mission for Spurs, and Dominic Solanke celebrating. I wonder also, I mean, Jonathan, in terms of, you know, the one real challenge for him has been injuries and consistency of that playing personnel all season. But Dominic Solanke has just started to pick up a little bit of momentum, scoring more regularly, seems comfortable in that Spurs shirt. I wonder how pivotal he could be in terms of exposing the weaknesses of, you know, the United back line.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think, you know, I've been very critical of Spurs. You know, I think, as have a lot of people this season, they've played a lot of dross. You know, they've played a lot of dross without injuries, and they played a lot of dross with injuries. But, you know, Solanke is, you know, one of those players who I think is just coming into a little bit of form. And I think most people would probably have United as favourites for the final. I honestly think if Spurs can get Son back, if they can get Kulusevski into some kind of form, I think they have the dribbling ability essentially to really cause United a lot of problems. And United are a team who, if you run at them, if you let them have the ball, and then you transition hard and you run at them, that's where you cause them problems. And that is where Amorim's United has often come unstuck against teams who are, you know, who are quite compact, who can be quite pragmatic, teams like Wolves, teams like Bournemouth, and have then beaten them but with pace and dynamism. And I think if you know, Solanke is one of those players, Kulusevski, you know, perhaps even Matthijs Tel off of the bench, I honestly think Spurs, it's a matchup that I would quite enjoy if I was Ange Postecoglou. I would quite enjoy plotting a way to try and get around this Manchester United team, because a lot of clubs this season have managed to. I think it's relevant that Spurs have beaten them 3 times in domestic competition this season. I think it's relevant that Amorim's lost his last 5 finals with Sporting in the Taça Portugal and the Taça de Liga. The history of these two clubs would suggest that there's only going to be one winner, but I think that the stylistic matchup actually looks quite good for Spurs here.
Yeah, that sort of verticality, as they say, in Spain, is that word, that, you know, that direct running, you know, trying to hit with pace on that transition, that could really just, you know, set the jitters running. I mean, we saw it, in fact, didn't we? Athletic Club kind of did that. They were applying the pressure, and suddenly you're behind Harry Maguire, and he then sends the ball into no man's land, and they pick them off and score. Let's go to the back page of your newspaper, Charlie, The Sun. So, yes, of course, the full English. The Sun showing typical form, I would say, in terms of your headline, in terms of the way you're looking at this one, Charlie. But talking a little bit about Manchester United, I mean, the picture there, you can see Mason Mount with his captain, you know, in his arms there. What a significant night do you feel it might be for him, given, you know, he's had such a tough time, but also just the quality of both goals?
He has had such a tough time, as you say. A really... Yeah, nightmare couple of years. What was it, £55 million? He struggled with injuries, really struggled with his form when he has been fit. And yeah, it's just been a lousy spell for him. But, you know, I was at Brentford the other day, scored a terrific goal. And, you know, there's a good player there. I know Gareth Southgate used to get stick for picking him all the time, but there was a reason why he did. Because he's a really good, solid player and can be a class player. You know, on his day, he's not played for England. I think the last time was the quarter-final of the World Cup in Qatar. So that really sums up his struggles, you know, both for club and country. But yeah, his United career has just not got off the ground. I think he's only completed 90 minutes once since he's been at Old Trafford, and I don't think that was in the Premier League. I think it was a League Cup game, and he's, you know, only, I think, played 7 or 8 matches where he's completed over 60 minutes. So that just sums up his issues, really. But a brilliant cameo performance tonight. That will give his confidence, you know, such a huge boost, and for United. And that will really help their chances. If they can get him, again, you know, give him a few starts. That's why I think, Amorim, as you mentioned at the start of the programme, will sort of rest some players, but he's not going to be resting them all the time. He needs some players to really be hitting top form, and maybe Mason Mount, maybe it's written in the stars that Mason Mount could end up being, you know, the Manchester United hero and the player to win them the trophy and to get them back into the Champions League.
Mount gives glimpse of old magic is the headline inside the Telegraph talking about Mason Mount. And in fact, actually, within the article, you can see there, it's just like a little yellow box. It's kind of in the middle of the screen towards the bottom. It's a little stat. Mason Mount has now doubled his goal tally for United after the 2 goals tonight. The first 2 both came against Brentford. So it kind of shows, how much he struggled really in front of goal as one of those attacking midfielders. I wonder, Jonathan, do you feel that he could be a potential option for Ruben Amorim to start against Tottenham in Bilbao?
Yeah, I mean, I think realistically for Mount, his long-term future at United is probably going to be as an understudy to Bruno Fernandes. I think there is still a huge question mark, I think, over whether he has the physical robustness to get through 40, 50 games a season as United, a team aspiring to challenge in all 4 competitions. But I think as a player who can stick to a tactical plan, you saw how well he played in the Champions League final for Chelsea, for example, in 2021. His ability to stick to a tactical plan, to keep the ball, to not do impetuous things, that kind of temperament, those sorts of qualities are so important, especially in a final. That's why successive coaches have stuck by him and shown faith in him throughout those injuries. So yeah, I don't know if he starts. I don't know if you would put him in a first choice United 11. I don't know if you'd put him in a first choice United 18. But I think in this game, he may well have a role to play simply because of how well he's playing at the moment and how well he can follow a plan.
And well, yes, he knows he's been there before in big finals, and also, of course, United have been there before because they won that first leg of the semi-final away to Athletic Club. So back to Bilbao we go, May the 21st. Thank you very much indeed, guys. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers, including this in the eye. Plastic fantastic. Tottenham win in Bodo to book final against Manchester United, and Napoli are the favourites to capture Kevin De Bruyne. Stay with us. We're back in a couple of minutes. Charlie's mentioned this before. Yes, I mean, it could go either way, but ultimately for one manager, it is more critical than for the other, and that is Ange Postecoglou. We always ask you this, especially on a Thursday night when Spurs have played. You put the Ange lens on things. So what's going to happen if Spurs do win that Europa League final? Does he stay?
So, I mean, there does appear to be this consensus that he's gone either way, right? And I don't know. I don't think the players are playing like they think he's gone in the summer either way. I've certainly haven't heard any indication from the club that that's a decision they've made. I just think people kind of underestimate what it's going to feel like if Spurs break that 40-year European trophy drought. What it would do for the mentality of Tottenham Hotspur to win a Europa League and to do it against Manchester United as well, to do it against multiple European Cup winners and Premier League winners. The way it would change the way Spurs are seen. And if you go through Europa League winners in the past, most of them are already kind of continental giants. But for the teams that aren't, for teams like Atalanta and Eintracht Frankfurt and Sevilla, who hadn't won anything in about 60 years before they won their first UEFA Cup in the mid-2000s, these trophies are genuinely transformative. They transform the mentality, they transform the expectations, they transform the caliber of players that you could attract, because suddenly the stature of the club is so much higher than it was, 90 minutes earlier. And I just think if Spurs can do it, and I don't think they're guaranteed to do it by any means. If Spurs do it, I think the feeling around the club is just going to be so different that it will actually be very hard to let go of Ange Postecoglou after he's led them to a moment like that. And what it would mean for Spurs to do that, I just don't think it's cut and dried by any stretch of the imagination.
Can I just come back to you, Charlie, just for a brief list of follow-ups on that and how you see, the Ange Postecoglou tenure right now? Back page of the Mail, by the way. Again, same headline there. And we're all off to sunny Spain, full English, they say again, in the Europa final for Bilbao's Spurs and United cruise. So what's your view on Ange tonight, Charlie?
Look, I agree with Jonathan in that if you take the game in isolation, Tottenham winning the Europa League would be one of the greatest moments of their entire history. Not just recent history, the entire club to do that. So from the outside, it would seem crazy to then get rid of the manager. But I think there's other factors involved there. And also add the fact that I think Postecoglou has become very frustrated with the situation. And he might also think, right, OK, I won the trophy. And I'm going to look somewhere else. I don't think, we should not consider that could play a part as well. So look, it's an uneasy situation, but ultimately, I think it's a great opportunity for Tottenham. It really is. It's going to be a terrific night, and of course for Manchester United as well. And it's a shame that we're not going to have an English club in the final of the Champions League. But I think this sort of makes up for it to a degree. Not that any Arsenal fans would agree, but it will be a great night. And it's just a bit curious that it's only a 13-day turnaround, isn't it? There's not an awful lot of time for people to plan this trip.
Let's move on to a bit of transfer news, which is on the back page of the Eye. Napoli, Charlie, are favourites to capture Kevin De Bruyne. We know that he's leaving Manchester City. They decided not to offer him a new deal. So what do you think of that as a fit, and also the league he'd be playing in Serie A? How does that match up with his talents?
Oh, I mean, I think it would be an opportunity he'd love. Of course, Napoli are on the verge of something special this season. They've sort of turned their Serie A season around. They're 3 points clear with 3 games to go. Scott McTominay's the unlikely hero in Naples. And De Bruyne, I think, would jump at the chance. But I think it's going to be a very long queue for him. There'll be several other clubs in Italy. Of course, we've seen quite a few Premier League players go to Italy. But equally, De Bruyne has said that he is open to staying in England. It's not the fact that Manchester City have shown him the door. I think he's already said that doesn't mean it's the end of his adventure in England. But I think playing playing in Serie A for Napoli, Kevin De Bruyne, I think if it already feels like a good fit. So that'd be a really interesting one. But as I said, there'll be some other clubs that want him, both in Europe and elsewhere around the world, because he is a brilliant player and he still has quite a lot to offer, I think.
Similar coloured shirt, if nothing else, Charlie, from Manchester City to Napoli as well. Jonathan, your thoughts? Does it work for you, that combination, Napoli and Kevin De Bruyne and Napoli?
Yeah, I mean, if the hunger's there, I think if you look at De Bruyne's comments since it was announced that he was leaving, he clearly still feels he could do a job for City. He clearly still feels he could do a job at the top level in a big European league. So I think if the hunger is there and the physicality, he's still physically able to get around a pitch, which is going to be easier in Serie A than the Premier League. That's just a fact. And the finances work as well from a Napoli side. It's a very, very intriguing deal.
OK, let's switch our focus to rugby union. The Lions squad for the Tour of Australia has been named 38-man party, and Andy Farrell is, obviously at the helm of it and choosing who is going to be in that. And look, we know there Mario Itoje is the captain. We know that there is an interesting selection there with Pollock, just the one cap, but obviously he's brilliant. But his own son not in the 38-man squad as it stands. What's your assessment of that, Jonathan, on the whole, in terms of captain, Pollock and Owen Farrell?
Yeah, on Owen Farrell, I think it would be a slightly different situation if Racing were playing a lot better, if they were having a good season, and if Farrell were fit and in form and making a kind of an unassailable case for selection. And none of those things have been true over the previous few months. I think if Andy Farrell had a route to take Owen Farrell, and the fact that he's left 2 spots open suggests that route is still open. But I think if there was an excuse to take him, I think he would take him. But then you would have to answer, out of Finn Russell and the 2 Smith, who do you leave out to accommodate him? You could make as much of a case that George Ford would take that slot over Owen Farrell. So that deals with Farrell. In terms of Pollock, it's an incredibly exciting selection. Yes, he's only got 1 cap. He's only played 20 minutes of 6 Nations, but what he's shown this season and against. Playing against Leinster in the Aviva, which is basically an Ireland team, what he did against the Lions in Pretoria, big performances away from home in hostile environments. And that's the kind of thing that coaches notice, because it shows character. You hear people talking about his character and his cockiness, was it that Farrell was saying today. And this is the sort of player who can have a transformative effect on a party. He gives energy, he gives excitement. He's the sort of player that you would pay to watch. He's the sort of player who's going to sell, TV packages and tickets for this tour. People are going to want to watch him. So, he is one of the exciting selections. I think when they announced it at the O2 today, his selection, I think, got the biggest reception, the biggest cheer. And there were also these lovely scenes from Northampton where they were announcing it, and it kind of shows the affection in which he's held. And it must be an incredibly exciting time to be him right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And just finally, and in fact, Jonathan, we know this is shown live on Sky Sports this summer, but it's also one of those things, people get up early to watch it because it's games going on in Australia. They're in the pubs early. that spectacle of the Lions Talk, because it only comes around once every 4 years. It's very briefly from you. It's special, isn't it?
It is, and it's unique in sport. I mean, obviously, it's been massively commercialized. You see today's launch. There is a huge commercial element to it. But the fact that it's once every 4 years, once every 12 years to these various nations, the fact that these 4 nations come together and bury their tribal rivalries, it's incredibly special. And I'll definitely make time to watch it, and I'm sure a lot of people will do the same.
Super. Jonathan, Charlie, pleasure to have your company as always. Thank you for your insights. We'll see you again very, very soon indeed. If you missed any of the show, there is another chance to see Back Pages tonight at 1:30. The show is also available as a podcast. Just simply download Back Pages wherever you get your pods. Join us again Friday night. Our guests will be Mark Ogden and Miguel Delaney. It has been another huge night in Europe for Manchester United and Tottenham, and it is an all-English final in Bilbao in 13 days' time. And, of course, Chelsea through too to the Conference League final.